Welcome to the cityCURRENT show. I'm your host, Andrew Bartolotta. We're always honored to bring you conversations with individuals and organizations making an impact in our community and around the globe. And today we're diving into sports, but don't be weary. If you're not an expert in rankings or leagues or who won this week's game, this conversation's for you and me. Today we're talking with the co-founder of last night's game, Amy Siegfried. Amy, before we talk about last night's game, it's important for our viewers to understand your background and career. You have a fascinating career as a TEDx speaker, entrepreneur, and I read that you even flew around the world in 58 hours and 37 minutes. Tell us about your background and what ultimately inspired you to start last night's game.
Thank you for having me here. And I think just like everyone, we have this broken road to get to where we are. And I am no different. I've been fired, I've been laid off, we've done all those things, and it's made me better and stronger. And it's actually made me a better leader, really, truly, because it's allowed me to reflect back on what I didn't like or what wasn't working well for me in those situations and how I could make that better for someone else as I manage them. So I started last night's game because we'll fast forward a little bit. In college, I ended up getting a job with the Arizona Diamondbacks. I went to Arizona State University, and I worked in the community relations department and for the team's foundation. And so I ended up working my way up through that position all the way to running the department. But when I started as an intern, I realized that none of my girlfriends really knew what was going on in the world of sports. And I can't say that I watched a ton of sports. I grew up with a little brother who played every sport that's imaginable. We're talking anything from volleyball to football to basketball to roller hockey. I mean, I really was kind of forced to learn all those things as I watched him play. And I just realized what an advantage I had as a woman in business, knowing just a little bit about sports. And so at that point, I called my brother and said, "Hey, I've got this idea. What if we somehow translated the fun part of sports, the stories, the interesting side of it, the pop culture tie-in, and not the statistics? What if we did that? And that would help our friends go on dates. They go work in male-dominated industries. They can talk to the guys in the boardroom. And what if we did that?" And he's my rational mind. He said, "Well, I'm still in high school, and you work 80 hours a week. How are we going to do that?" And so I was like, "Okay, good point." And that was before you could make your own website or MailChimp existed or any of those things. And so fast forward about 14 years later, my husband and I were moving back to the United States from Singapore. And I moved right around Thanksgiving and I realized no one's hiring. I tried to find a job and no one was hiring. It was Thanksgiving, as we know, no one hires till really the new year. And so I thought, I've got this month and a half. What if we give this a go? And so my brother was here for Thanksgiving and we talked about it and he's like, "Okay, let's give it a shot." So that's how we created last night's game. And it started as they say, if you launch a business and your product is perfect, you launch too late. Our product was ugly. It was started as a Gmail, just email account that went out with a link to a website. And it tended to be a little more sports heavy than we really wanted to be, breaking down games. But that's how my co-founder is my brother. And that's how his brain works. He loves sports. He's the reason, like I said, I know so much. And so we ended up, I sort of fine-tuned him to think like a non-sports fan. And he's kind of fine-tuned me to speak a bit more like a sports fan. And so we've come together to really create this short, succinct, we have a tri-weekly email newsletter that goes out. It's about a 3-minute read. And then we have a 5-minute podcast once a week. And so our whole goal is short, sweet. We incorporate pop culture. And so while the topic that comes into your email might be about the Major League Baseball season, it has the really fun things about the baseball season. We talk about food and sort of the quirky other things you might be able to know and share if you go to a baseball game.
I love that last night's game is all about short, digestible content that you can relate to those conversations and sort of spin your conversation to some of the things that because of last night's game that make it to where you can still be part of the conversation and not just go, "Okay, let's talk about the weather," or "Let's talk about something else," because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, and that's, I think, the greatest thing about sports, that there's so many things that tie into sports, whether that's, pop culture, you're talking about who's married to who's dating who, something along that lines, or you're talking about travel or food. There's so many ways to tie into sports. So you might talk about what happened in last night's game. But then you can tie that into, well, okay, so I saw that Memphis Grizzlies game, but have you been to Memphis? Where do you like to eat? What do you like to do there? My favorite thing to do in this city, it's an easy way to kind of turn that into a conversation about travel, about food, and you really get a lot more out of someone than sitting and talking about the 1962 Boston Red Sox, because I've been in that conversation and it's painful because I don't know anything about the 1962 Boston Red Sox. So it's kind of a fun way. I always find that you can really turn that conversation in and out of. I mean, it works. I've used it a lot in like political conversations. Someone starts diving a little bit too far for me. Like, you know what? Did you know that George Bush played baseball at Yale? Like, you can always turn something in there, and so that's kind of how we approach sports, and something that it makes sports more approachable for everyone. And we cover all sports, so it's truly not just specifically for football or for golf. All those things are factored in. And we're talking about what's happening now, so it makes it relevant.
What has been the response to last night's game?
It's actually been really great. I received an email this week from a lady. I got my MBA at the University of Notre Dame, and she said, "Oh, I read about you in an article that Notre Dame did, and I started following you, thinking I don't know anything about sports. I work in hedge funds." And she said, "I just really love this digestible content. It really does help me get into the boardroom and have those conversations. And just, it's the small talk, but
Mhm.
it continues to open up doors." And I always say you don't have to know everything, right? We just want one more tool in our tool belt to help us be successful. We do watch the news because we need to understand what's going on. And but we also, sometimes we like being that, hey, did you see this? What about this? If you know those things. And so I find that the response has been really positive. We have probably about 35 to 40% of our followers are men. And those are gentlemen who just don't follow sports, or they work in sales and they need to know a lot about the country and the world and what's going on, so they can pick up the phone and kind of be informed if there's something big happening somewhere.
And it seems like you've always had this entrepreneurial spirit when you talk about being a TEDx speaker and your time in sports as well, living in Singapore. What advice would you share with hopeful entrepreneurs, and tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurialism?
Well, this is my second business. My first one, I ended up getting laid off. And during that time when I was working full time, I had friends who said, I wish I could afford you. I wish you could work for me. I wish I could afford you." My background is sort of marketing events, and I was doing a lot of event planning. And so basically what happened is I got laid off, and I had a friend say, "Okay, well, can you work for me now?" And then another friend who said, "Can you work for me now? Can you work for me now?" So a lot of it was taking on those sort of side projects of some marketing work and event planning. I planned graduation for the nursing school for Arizona State and things like that, where I started picking up all these little side jobs, and it became this my full-time job. And then we moved to Singapore, and so that kind of all went away. But my father is a mechanic, so he was an entrepreneur from the very beginning and started at a very young age. And so I've always watched the drive that goes into, both my parents are very, very hard workers. And so I've watched that drive that goes into that. And the drive and the workload that comes with being an entrepreneur never scared me. What I really love about it is you do have the flexibility. I can
Mhm.
get up and get my son to school and come back and get to work and work. I work late, I work early. Sometimes you just figure it all out. And so, but what I would say advice wise is, if you have an idea, check it out, see what else, if there's someone else doing it, what are they doing? How can you make yourself different? I
Mhm.
think we're members, and I'm on the board of Irish Angels based in Chicago. And the one thing I say there is, we see a lot of businesses come in, but I want to see why you're different. What are you doing that's different? What are you doing? And maybe that's your price point is different. Maybe it's um, you found a whole different model and a whole different way to go around things. And so I say prove your point, but then also just do it. It's so scary. I think if anyone's ever had children, like, that's a scary, horrible decision. Like, oh my gosh, not horrible. That's a bad thing to say, but it's so scary because
It
this is
is.
a huge, huge life change. And being an entrepreneur and starting a business, that's a huge, huge life change. And if you're not in the spot where you can take a full leap, head first into it, start small. There are so many ways to do that, with, creating your own website. All those things can be done small. They don't require a lot of money investment at this point. I mean, it depends on your product, obviously, but you can really truly start to get that groundwork laid before you jump ship from your full-time job. And so I would say, but just do it. It's so scary, but it's so worth it. And if you fail, so what? I can tell you that I have learned so much in my time with last night's game, probably more than I could say in my career. I've learned all those things in my, let's see, gosh, I'm not going to try to date myself, but my 19-year career, I learned so much that set me up for being able to be just knowing enough to be dangerous with last night's game. But I've learned so much as an entrepreneur because you have to do everything yourself. You are the person, maybe you're not the accountant, but you go find the accountant. You're not the lawyer, but you find the lawyer. And you need to speak enough of that language to be able to engage with them. And that was part of the reason I went back to get my MBA is I really wanted to be well versed in all of those things. And so for me, it's the learning opportunity is huge. And that is amazing. I think that is by itself is so what you fail, you learned so much and it's so fulfilling to be able to do that and know that your blood, sweat, and tears has gone into something. And sure, maybe it doesn't work, but you've got to look at the other side of it. All the things that you've learned and the connections you've made, it's totally worth it. So just jump, just do it.
Yeah. And I think I love what you said about even if you're staying in the corporate world or even nonprofit sector and still trying to make your side hustle your main source of income, you have unique skill sets that set you apart from the average person in the corporate world that's done the same thing for 30 years because
Right.
you have to learn new skill sets, learn about things like MailChimp and marketing efforts and finding the lawyer and setting up the bank accounts and how you're going to pay the taxes and all these different things that really do, like I said, set you apart. So I think being an entrepreneur for many, many maybe even not realize that they are an entrepreneur as they start their side hustle because they may experience some imposter syndrome, but really for them,
Right.
setting apart in the corporate and nonprofit world is very important, especially now. And a lot of it is due to relationships. As an entrepreneur, how important is it been for you to build relationships? And do you have any tips for initiating and cultivating lasting relationships?
That's a great question. I was actually thinking in my head, this I need to make sure I mention this. I believe so much in collaboration, and it's really hard when you start a business. And really, you mentioned imposter syndrome. I think everybody has that. As much as we'd like to pretend we don't, I do. But I also try to remind myself, everyone has their own version of smart, right? What you're smart at, I'm not always smart. We might have some things in common, but we all have our version of smart. So remind yourself that you are really good at what you're really good at. So just remember that just because you don't know all the things, no one knows all the things. So just keep that in mind. But I would also say collaboration is so key. And when you start a business or you start as an entrepreneur, it can be very lonely. There's a lot of information. There's too much information, really. And you're learning about, should I be doing Facebook ads? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? What should I be doing? And it's very isolating. And so that collaboration and that working together, I really believe in partnerships. And that's something that that's my talent. I love collaboration. That's what I'd like to do. And so for me, it was finding other people that are also looking for, maybe it's media opportunities, it's people who want to be interviewed, it's whatever that might be, and find those people. And maybe they're looking to, we've worked with people who are true marketers, and okay, you want to practice your skills and test something, I'll test it. Why not? And so it's really truly finding that community. But then you also find that you're not alone. They're also struggling. They also have tough days. They also have things that are very similar to yours. They can't figure out their QuickBooks, whatever that might be. Everyone's struggling at something. And so I truly think part of that collaboration is that building a community. And that community is so huge to support you, but you're also supporting them because they need you too. And so I think that's something really truly to think about is we all have these great skill sets. How do you work together with someone who might fill a gap in a skill set that you don't have? But sometimes you just need someone to sit down and have a cup of coffee with and say, I don't get this. I'm frustrated. It's not growing like I want it to be, whatever that might be, because everyone's in that boat. And don't be afraid to be your true self when it comes to those kinds of things. Because as I will tell you from personal experience, hiding it and trying to pretend that you've got it all figured out doesn't work. You're going to grow more by asking for help. You're going to grow more by learning from others and showing some of your vulnerabilities. That's one thing that really gets aired out as an entrepreneur because you're it, right? You're it. You're sacrificing, and your vulnerabilities are very present. Where when you're in a corporate world, you're kind of sheltered with that when it comes down to it. So don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to invest in others, even though I know it seems like there's no time, because there's never enough time in the day. Invest in others as much as you're investing in yourself. But also, I always say this, especially people who are parents, put on your oxygen mask first. Take care of you first, and then take care of your rest of your humans. You need to be a little bit sane before you can make sure everything happens. So whether that's a walk, whether that's the one thing that makes you happy, I don't know, cooking, whatever that might be, make sure you incorporate that into your, maybe not daily life, but incorporate into where you feel like you're at least being fulfilled. Because if you're not, then you need to take a look at what else can happen, because it's so tough and it's so demanding to try to do all the things, and we can never do all the things. And so just make sure that you take care of you, and once again, reinvest in that community and invest in your people alongside you. So that's my 2 cents, if you will.
There is power in collective impact and being able to lift others up and be part of that community. And like you said, you may know the solution to someone's QuickBooks problem, and they may help you with Facebook ads. And so there's so many things that you, even as a solopreneur or entrepreneur, and you may not have a huge team around you, but having that collaboration with other entrepreneurs, like-minded people, even in different industries, to say, hey, have you ever thought about this? Or, oh, I know how to do that, or apply for a business loan, or work with different chambers or whatnot. I think that's great advice for entrepreneurs and those that want to start their own business. What puts a smile on your face when you look at the work that you've been able to accomplish in many different industries?
It's really interesting. I would say overall in my career, what puts a smile on my face is that what I've done, I've grown. And I would say that I've learned a lot from what I was when I first started as an intern, and even, started with the first team of 6 and grew from there. And it's one of those, as I've grown my career, I've continued to learn and evolve. And I think that makes me better, because it keeps me humble. Obviously, when we look back at some of our failures, it keeps you humble, but it also, I believe in continuing to evolve as a human. And so for me, it's like, okay, I've taken these failures and I've learned from them, and I've done them with my head high. I've tried to create a good community around me. As you mentioned, I've moved quite a bit. So continuing to cultivate that community. I have a young son, and so having him, and it's challenging, as you know, with kids too. It's sometimes mom has to work, and sometimes mom has to say, I'll be with you in just a moment, I've got to finish this up. And that's hard, but I try to remind myself that I'm instilling the work values that my parents did.
Mm-hmm.
My parents hustled hard, and so it was really important for me to see that. And I know at times that was hard to not have them to go play hide and seek with, or go play in the yard, but it was really important for me to see how hard they hustled, and remember that I still feel just as loved because they had to go to work one day, or whatever that might be. And so I feel like I continue to evolve, continue to invest in myself, but invest in those around me and bring them up with me. And one of the things I really have been pushing for lately is finding those who are early in their career and helping them with, just be that sounding board. Because I especially as women, we're really not attuned to have mentors. I find that that's just something that's really not there. And so you just need that person sometimes to say, I'm going to ask for a raise. What am I supposed to say? What don't I say? Should I ask for a raise? Should I switch jobs? Whatever that might be. What's my personal branding? Whatever that might be. And just being that sounding board and being available for life questions, work questions, whatever that might be, to really support those who are continuing to come up through their career. So that's just something for me that I kind of lacked. I've had some good people along the way, but felt like that's something I could have used more of. And so that's one area that I really feel like I'm in a space in my career where I need to dive in and help those who are just starting out.
Yes, a rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Amen. Yep.
That's great. Where can people go to learn more about you, Last Night's Game, and support your work?
We are lastnightsgame.com. And as I mentioned, we have a tri-weekly email newsletter, which you can sign up for right there on the homepage. But we also are on Instagram, Last Night's Game, and I run that account. The stories are behind the scenes of Last Night's Game with me. So you'll see my crazy tiny human and all the things we get into, along with just some of the successes we're having, and some of the failures we're having too. And let's see, podcast on all major podcast platforms. And that comes out on Wednesdays once a week. And like I said, it's usually never over 5 minutes because I believe in short and sweet and get on with your day and go conquer the world.
Amy, thank you so much for coming on the City Current Show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.